Seraphina Everly and Xander Harlow were married on a warm, sunny afternoon at the old lakeside estate, when she had just turned 26 and still carried dreams brimming in her heart. Xander, heir to a renowned multinational conglomerate, looked attentive and warm as he slipped a delicate wedding ring onto her finger, promising a full, happy future, but marital life soon proved that happiness wasn't so easily painted. In those first days, Seraphina believed she had the ideal husband. Xander would kindly take her to lavish soirees, compliment her elegance when she wore evening gowns, and vow to take care of her for the rest of his life. Yet behind the grand drapes, Xander spent most of his time on gargantuan business deals, leaving Seraphina alone at home with solitary dinners. During that period, Xander hired Elara Marcellus, an attractive, smooth-talking assistant, to work by his side. Behind her bright makeup tinged with a hint of darkness, Elara quietly sowed seeds of jealousy. When Seraphina received news that she was carrying their first child, it should have been an overwhelming moment of joy. Instead, Elara saw an opportunity to steal Xander's whole heart. Elara secretly spread rumors that Seraphina had orchestrated everything to get her hands on the Harlow family fortune, causing Xander to drift away from his wife. One evening, Elara invited Seraphina and Xander to a celebratory drink under the pretense of congratulating her on her pregnancy, then surreptitiously slipped a sedative into Seraphina's wine. While Xander fussed over signing an important contract, Seraphina only had time to feel the world spin before she collapsed onto the cold wooden floor. Xander's phone rang incessantly, but he remained unaware that his wife lay unconscious in the doorway of the reception room. The next morning, when Seraphina awoke in a hospital bed, she felt a hollow emptiness as the doctor informed her that she had miscarried at 4 months and barely survived internal injuries. The searing pain felt like a knife to her heart whenever she recalled the sight of Elara slipping out of the room under dim light, a faint smile lingering on her lips. After hearing a brief summary of the medical report yet stubbornly defending Elara, Xander forced Seraphina to dismiss her suspicions, insisting that Seraphina had simply gotten too drunk and tripped. Holding every ounce of her anguish close, Seraphina realized she could no longer endure life beside a husband who couldn't trust her, and she decided to file for divorce. On her final night at the estate, Seraphina's gaze was heavy with sorrow as she entered the bedroom, packed away her cobalt blue leather suitcase, and carefully gathered each memento of a love that had grown cold: the commemorative knitted scarf, the faded wedding photograph. She whispered a soft farewell, then slipped into the silent corridor, her footsteps as light as dew melting at dawn. As soon as the divorce was finalized, Seraphina flew straight to France, settling in Cannes to rediscover herself amid the sea and sun. On that long flight, she stared at the indifferent sky beyond the airplane window, determined that from this moment forward, she would build a new life, one with no place for traitors or old dreams. Deep inside, Seraphina felt a small, growing belief: no matter how deep the wound, among the breaths of the blue sea, she would find her own path. When the plane touched down at Nice Côte d'Azur Airport, Seraphina felt the salty breeze of the Mediterranean flood the cabin, clearing some of the gloom within her. She moved into a small apartment in Cannes' ancient Le Saquet district, with marble-tiled corridors and white-framed windows overlooking the bay. Each morning, she awoke to the distant ring of church bells and the scent of rich coffee drifting from a nearby café, things she had never noticed back at the Harlow estate. Seraphina opened a small bookstore as a part-time endeavor, where she met Beatrice Dubois, the friendly bookstore owner, with windswept blonde curls, who kept urging Seraphina to learn French and attend cultural gatherings to ward off loneliness. After her first month of settling in, Seraphina questioned whether she should dare embrace this new life, for deep down, the memory of her miscarriage shock and her lingering hatred for Xander still haunted her, preventing her from opening her heart again. One chilly Friday evening, Beatrice invited Seraphina to a small gathering at the Château de la Croix, an estate tucked away on a hill blanketed with olive trees, where entrepreneurs, artists, and writers met monthly to savor fine wines and debate art. Seraphina hesitated at first but finally agreed, wanting to challenge herself among unfamiliar faces. Entering through the moss-covered stone gate, she was struck by the castle's white stone facade glowing under golden lights, with the ocean shimmering under the moon beyond. Melodious music, like the background score of a classic film, filled the air, and attendees wore attire that emphasized elegance, men in impeccably tailored suits, women in flowing evening gowns. Amid the crowd, Seraphina felt shy with each step, but the music and laughter around her eased her heavy heart. Beatrice led her to a round table laden with fine wine and gourmet cheeses, where a lively discussion about contemporary art was in full swing. Seraphina clasped her hands and bowed politely to her new acquaintances, sipped a warm, velvety red wine, then slipped outside to the balcony to gaze at the sea. There, a man stood alone, wearing a perfectly cut black suit, his dark brown hair slightly tousled over his forehead, and eyes as deep and blue as the ocean depths. He held a glass of wine, looking out at the moonlit waves. His bearing was calm, yet tinged with a subtle melancholy. As Seraphina gently rested her hand on the railing, his footsteps sounded softly behind her. "Are you all right?" he asked in soft English, his accent Northern English with a faint American lilt from years living in London. The golden light played upon his face, illuminating the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, testaments to a life rich with experience. Seraphina, surprised by his warm voice, nodded gently. "I'm fine, thank you." Before she could finish, he smiled and raised his glass. "Try a sip of this special champagne. It's my go-to when I'm feeling down." In that moment, his eyes held a stranger's sincerity, and Seraphina felt a flutter of nerves. She accepted the glass, her hand trembling slightly from the wine she had already sampled. The stranger sat beside her, softly asking her name before introducing himself as Maximilian Armand, owner of a chain of luxury hotels in London and Paris, visiting to find inspiration for a new cultural project. Seraphina was astonished that every word he spoke seemed like honey, coaxing her to forget her initial awkwardness. They spoke of art, of the ancient streets of Provence, and gradually drifted to the subject of life. When Seraphina mentioned her past, she only lightly said that she had endured difficult times and wanted to escape everything to start anew. Max smiled gently, eyes thoughtful. Perhaps some people need to drift to another horizon to truly find their purpose. His words struck a deep chord within her, causing her voice to falter and her heart to warm. As the clock quietly struck past midnight, guests' faces bore the flush of wine, and the music swelled with more fervor. Max rose and invited her to join him on the dance floor. Under the sparkling crystal lights, the crowd swayed to mellow jazz, their footsteps scattering rays of light that dissolved all boundaries. Though Seraphina felt hesitant at first, she gradually relaxed to the rhythm, allowing herself to be swept into Max's warm embrace. The trumpets pealed with urgency, awakening within her a will to live. She closed her eyes and savored the moment, temporarily forgetting every wound. While shadows of her past still lingered at the edge of her mind, Max lightly touched her shoulder, leaning in to whisper at her ear, "At this late hour, would you like to walk with me down to the seaside lawn? It's serene there, with only the waves and the moonlight." Seraphina's heart raced, partly from the wine, partly from the earnestness in his eyes, and she nodded. They slipped away from the grand hall and onto the soft, cool sand, where the sea breeze brushed against their skin. Max seated himself beside her, setting the glass of champagne in the sand before gently brushing his lips against her forehead, first a cool, tender kiss, then one burning with desire. In that instant, all the knots in Seraphina's heart unraveled. They shared passionate kisses, and within minutes, reason gave way to intoxication and longing. On that cold sand under the moon's reflection upon the sea, Seraphina and Max surrendered to a spontaneous intimacy. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, Seraphina awoke to find a strong hand gently holding her arm. She sat up trembling, bewildered to see Max already dressed in a loose shirt, looking at her with a mixture of regret and tenderness. Seraphina struggled to find words, stammering, You're really here?" Max sighed, pressed a light kiss to her forehead, and said shyly, "I didn't expect that to happen, but I didn't want you to leave without knowing who I am." Conflicting emotions surged through Seraphina: remorse, shame for letting herself be led by wine, and worry that her impulsive decisions might bring unforeseen consequences. Before Max could speak further, Seraphina silently dressed, then hurriedly departed the rented room, leaving behind a hastily scrawled note: "I'm sorry. I need space to think. Please don't look for me." She slipped into the hallway, leaving Max's astonished face behind the closed door. Walking back to her apartment, Seraphina's heart pounded in turmoil, uncertain where that fleeting liaison would lead. But one fear had already taken root: a new life was forming, one beyond her control. Along the shoreline, the waves lapped rhythmically as though whispering a warning that, from this moment on, Seraphina would have to face the repercussions of one intoxicated night, and her life, and the life growing within her, would spiral into unforeseeable currents. After that impulsive night with Max, Seraphina returned to her small apartment weighed down by regret and endless thoughts. She lay awake for nights on end, unable to stop replaying the moonlit moment, the fervent kiss, and the strange sense of peace she'd felt with a man she barely knew, now etched into her heart. Every time she sat before her vanity mirror, studying herself, she perceived something different in her body. Her breasts felt heavier, and her stomach would occasionally twinge. Such feelings couldn't be mere imagination. Ever since leaving Xander, she had tried to walk away from all complications, keeping that chance encounter a secret. But when a pregnancy test showed 2 faint lines, she knew she couldn't deny the truth. For the first time in years, Seraphina didn't cry. She simply stood in the pale morning light, her mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts, becoming a mother alone in a foreign land, evading Xander and her entire past. Was this the right choice? After her initial panic, she packed a small bag and made her way to the discreet hospital on Rue d'Antibes for a checkup. The middle-aged French doctor congratulated her on being 6 weeks along, advising her to eat nutritiously, rest well, and avoid overexertion. Seraphina didn't reveal who the baby's father was. She only smiled and nodded before hastening out of the clinic. She vowed that no one, especially Xander, would ever learn the truth, because if he discovered the child, he would surely come after her and strip her of freedom for both herself and the tiny life within her. During her first month of pregnancy, Seraphina lived more reclusively, mornings spent by the Mediterranean, teaching English to small families, evenings working a side job at a coastal cafe, always maintaining a cautious distance from everyone. She ordered a small wooden cradle online, choosing a soft pastel hue, a gentle lullaby in furniture form. She cut every expense to the bone, eating simply, buying only vegetables and fruit at the morning market, saving every franc so that when the baby arrived, she could breathe easier. By the time her belly was noticeably showing during the 4th month, Seraphina moved to a more discreet apartment in Le Cannet, erasing every clue of her old place to avoid Xander and any private investigators. The new flat was smaller but cozier, overlooking olive groves and the deep blue sea. There, she kept her routine of waking at dawn to watch the sunrise while mist still cloaked the low buildings, and quietly whispered to her unborn child, "My dear, I'll do everything to make sure you're safe." As autumn crept in and the leaves turned golden, chilly afternoons sharpened Seraphina's sense of what it meant to be a mother. The first hints of morning sickness arrived. She could only stomach vegetable porridge and fruit, but her heart warmed whenever she heard herself hum lullabies to her unborn baby. She meticulously recorded every tiny movement, the baby's gentle kicks, and her dreams of taking her child everywhere, introducing her to classical music and the ocean's peaceful symphony. Each afternoon, Seraphina cycled to Montfleur Park, where rows of lavender bloomed violet, sat quietly as the breeze swept by, and sometimes encountered a gentle French mother teaching her toddler to walk. The woman said little, never smoked, never spoke excessively, but looked at Seraphina with affectionate eyes and shared her story of being a single mom. The early months aren't easy, but when your child laughs, all hardships vanish. Those words were like a rainstorm nourishing Seraphina's soul. Gradually, rumors spread of a young Asian woman living quietly with a sizable bump among the residents. Neighbors grew curious, but Seraphina always offered a polite smile and deflected any questions about the baby's father. Still, she couldn't avoid Xander's hired detectives scouring the area. Any passerby who recognized her might be interviewed, but to ordinary local residents, Seraphina remained as unnoticed as a single grain of sand on a vast beach. As the 9th month approached, Seraphina moved from her small apartment into a high-rise near the local hospital's maternity ward, where she planned to give birth. The room flooded with natural light, and the wide window framed a view of the ocean, whose gentle waves lulled her each night. The day she gave birth to Celeste Aurora was calm, with a gentle breeze and clouds drifting lazily across a deep blue sky. The baby arrived with strong, adorable cries, her jet-black hair and slightly narrowed eyes as if she were examining the strange new world. Seraphina held her daughter in her arms, tears streaming down her face, not from pain but from overwhelming joy. She finally had her own child, and her heart, which had labored in fear throughout those 9 months, now beat warmly again. She longed to tell Celeste about the night sky the first time she saw her, to teach her to listen to the sea's lullaby and cherish every peaceful moment. Yet Seraphina also understood that this peace could vanish at any time if Xander discovered them. Therefore, she registered for the birth under the name Sophie Moreau, a simple alias so that her medical records wouldn't reveal her true identity. The lives of mother and child began in loving arms but under the shadow of fear. By day, Seraphina drank homemade turmeric wine to recover, then quietly learned how to change diapers, prepare bottles, and lull her daughter to sleep. In the afternoons, she carefully placed Celeste in her high chair and introduced pureed vegetables and fruits bit by bit. Whenever Celeste fussed, Seraphina needed only to gaze at her daughter and kiss her soft hair for the baby to settle, as though she sensed the warmth and unconditional love. To keep everything concealed, Seraphina avoided taking Celeste anywhere beyond routine checkups, until she discovered a group of mothers from the University of Medicine of Cannes who gathered at La Rubine Park each Sunday to bask in the sun and chat about raising children. Seraphina volunteered at the nearby community center, feigning busy work as a tutor, then each Sunday took Celeste to the park so that her daughter could play and so that she herself could connect with others and share a little of a single mother's challenges. The other mothers assumed she was a student studying education or languages and never suspected anything. Over those 2 years, Seraphina watched Celeste grow, learning to roll over, sit up, and then babbling her first words, a joy that left Seraphina in tears of happiness. Celeste's unsteady, chubby steps brought Seraphina back to her own days full of dreams and aspirations. To afford their life, Seraphina took online translation jobs at night and occasionally translated children's stories from English into Vietnamese, helping her daughter grow up trilingual in English, French, and her mother tongue. Every effort Seraphina made was to create a world full of love for her child, even though the fear of Xander always lurked in the shadows. Sometimes she wondered if the shadow of her ex-husband would reach to disrupt their peaceful life, but she forced herself to think, no matter what I face alone, I won't let my child live in fear. 2 years passed, and Celeste blossomed under overflowing love. She learned to paint lavender flowers, sang in English in a sweet babble, and clung to her mother like a shadow. Seraphina had learned to be a resilient mother, every step directed toward her daughter, as if her sole sacred mission in life. And in the silence of every night, when she heard her child's soft breathing about to drift into sleep, Seraphina silently thanked fate for bringing Celeste into her life, though she knew her daughter was the clearest proof of one fateful drunken night that would forever change both their lives. The 3rd summer since Celeste's birth found Seraphina and her daughter settling into a relatively peaceful daily routine. Each morning, mother and daughter walked along the shore, Celeste chattering bonjour as she greeted her little friends at La Rubine Park, while Seraphina quietly sipped a café au lait before heading to work at the library. Yet, in the shadows, Xander Harlow never ceased hunting for his ex-wife and the child he believed to be his own blood. Through an international network of private detectives, Xander gradually traced the trail to the Asian woman living under the name Sophie Moreau, the woman who had given birth at the clinic on Rue d'Antibes. He hired 2 professional French detectives and gave them a secret mission: verify her whereabouts and continually watch her every move. One day, the detectives reported having seen Sophie bringing a young girl into a small cafe in La Boca. Xander immediately planned his approach. One afternoon, while Seraphina was tutoring a Chinese family at her Le Cannet apartment, 2 strangers appeared in the hallway. They knocked on her door and feigned friendliness, asking for directions, but their probing stares set her nerves on edge. She swiftly bolted the door, her heart pounding. A cold breeze swept through, and Seraphina feared that Xander himself had come too close. She immediately contacted Beatrice Dubois and Hélène Dubois, the inspector who had helped her register the alias, and informed them of the situation, asking them to remain on alert because someone might be stalking her. Despite her vigilance, the months of caring for Celeste had left Seraphina weary and distracted, especially whenever Celeste innocently asked about her father. All she could do was smile, ruffle her daughter's hair, and say, "Your father is very far away. He'll come visit you when you're older." Even though her heart ached, how could she tell a child not yet 3 the truth? She neither wanted Celeste to grow up in doubt nor to lie forever. Seraphina vowed to protect her daughter at all costs. On one sweltering evening, after Seraphina and Celeste returned from a stroll to Saké Square, Xander's 2 detectives quietly trailed them from a pretend art viewing appointment at a local gallery. While Seraphina was closing the screen door to her apartment, they slipped downstairs and used a fiber optic scope to spy on anyone entering or exiting. Seeing Seraphina holding Celeste close as they chatted happily, they confirmed that this was indeed Sophie Moreau, and that the little girl was the very child Xander was seeking. The detective immediately reported to Xander that Seraphina had no live-in help, her life was quite calm, and he could stage a surprise operation. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Xander and one of his personal bodyguards rented a black van and drove into Le Cannet. Wearing a baseball cap pulled low, dark sunglasses, and slicked-back black hair, Xander silently observed Seraphina's new apartment from the shadows. Only a handful of late-night passers-by noticed the lurking figure. When the sea breeze whispered through the window slits, Seraphina awoke to a strange noise: a van idling opposite her apartment, headlights still on. Her hand trembled as she clutched a sleeping Celeste to her chest and listened to footsteps on the stoop. Then a deep, hoarse voice called out, "Open up, Sophie Moreau. Let us in to take your daughter." Terrified, Seraphina held her daughter tightly and answered, voice trembling, "Do you have any legal papers? I won't surrender my child to anyone without proper documentation." A mocking laugh echoed, "Mr. Harlow already has a custody order, fraudulently issued by a false court. Open up, or we will force our way in." In that instant, Seraphina realized she could not stand against Xander's immense power. She pulled Celeste under the bed and piled blankets and pillows to block the view, stifling her daughter's frightened sobs. The steady pounding on the door made her heart feel as if it might burst. Suddenly, a crowbar slid through the crack, and metal hinges creaked under pressure. Seraphina did everything she could to stop them. She shouted loudly, knocked over a nearby potted plant to make noise, but it was in vain. The door was pried open, revealing a group of masked intruders. Flashlights illuminated Seraphina's panic-stricken face, and the tearful cries of a still drowsy Celeste echoed heartbreakingly through the apartment. Before she could react, a tall man in a black suit and baseball cap spoke coldly, "This girl belongs to Mr. Harlow. There's nothing more to discuss." He yanked Seraphina's hair, and she collapsed, shrieking, "Get away. You cannot take my child." Celeste's wide, bewildered eyes opened as she was lifted from her mother's arms, her wail of pure distress ripping through the apartment. In her desperation and agony, Seraphina flailed, but a forceful shove sent her sliding across the cold tile floor. She could only reach out to the fading silhouette of her daughter in a flimsy white robe, as her child's cries resounded with utter torment. Under the flickering yellow light, Celeste sobbed hysterically as she was torn from her mother's embrace, clinging to her mother's tear-streaked face. As the intruders slammed the door with a loud click of the lock, Celeste vanished like a vanishing dream. Seraphina lay gasping beside her broken left arm, with the pounding footsteps of arriving police officers in the distance. She desperately wanted to call out for help, but could only stretch her hand toward the window, hoping to catch sight of her daughter. Only darkness greeted her. In that agonizing moment, Seraphina understood that the 2 peaceful years she had built were over. Her daughter, her entire world, had been snatched away. She lay drenched in tears amid the empty apartment, the faint echo of a guitar drifting from the hallway, and silently vowed, "I will not let him have the chance to erase us." The pain of losing her child tore at her heart, and she doubled over in sobs, collapsing onto the cold floor, while throughout the night, police struggled to gather evidence. Medical personnel quickly sealed off the crime scene and took Seraphina's testimony, of a single mother without any genuine identification, only a stack of forged papers under the name Sophie Moreau. They escorted her away under a veil of pity, and Seraphina resolved, she would race against time to find Celeste before Xander's net tightened. Amid confusion, her will ignited stronger than ever. She would not back down and would make every person involved pay in order to bring her daughter home. When the first rays of dawn filtered through the thin curtain, Seraphina still trembled from the previous night's terror. The police had placed her in a protected room to give her statement, but her only concern was to find Celeste. Stepping out of the station, she spotted Max Armand standing quietly behind the security barricade. His clear blue eyes brimmed with worry as he saw Seraphina's bruised face and swollen eyelids from lack of sleep. Seraphina's heart raced. Here was the man who had not forgotten her, and most importantly, had vowed to help her find her daughter, despite not fully understanding their relationship. Max approached gently. "Are you okay? I'm sorry I'm late." Seraphina forced a faint smile and managed, I'm not okay. He took my daughter." Tears welled up, and she looked at Max as though begging for assistance. Max squeezed her hand firmly, his gaze burning with determination. "I will not let that happen. Let me help you." Max quickly contacted Hélène Dubois and Beatrice, asking them to mobilize their entire private intelligence network to track any trace of Xander Harlow. Meanwhile, Seraphina returned to her apartment, now devoid of her daughter's scent, finding only the small blanket stained with dried milk tucked in the corner of her bed. Fragmented memories surfaced, Celeste clinging to her mother's hand the previous morning, her clear laughter echoing on the sand, and her silky hair flying in the sunlight. She remembered how her daughter sweetly called, "Maman" as soon as she learned to speak, and now Seraphina punished herself for allowing any vulnerability. As Max and Hélène worked tirelessly to gather legal evidence, Seraphina absorbed every piece of advice: change her phone number, find a safe hiding place, and practice what to do if Xander or his henchmen appeared again. Amid the flurry of calls, Seraphina received a hastily snapped photograph from a detective. A little girl who looked exactly like Celeste was sitting in the back seat of a black car, clutching the lavender teddy bear her mother had given her. Beside the girl, Xander strode into the international clinic in Nice, his face etched with anguish and resolve. Seraphina shuddered and sprang upright, grabbing her phone and rushing out the door. She dialed Max shakily. "He's in Nice." Max did not hesitate. "Stay calm. I'll contact Hélène, we'll move at once." When they arrived at the international hospital, Hélène was already waiting outside. She handed Max a dossier containing images of Xander and the doctor's information, explaining that Xander had just registered Celeste's medical record under his real name. Armed with this evidence, Max and Seraphina headed to the pediatric clinic where Xander had taken Celeste. They hid behind a corridor corner and watched him emerge cradling his child, now unmistakably Celeste, dressed in pale pink, while he tossed the lavender teddy bear onto a bench and walked out coldly. Seeing that bear, Seraphina was stunned. It was the very gift she had sewn herself for her unborn child, scented faintly with the lavender oil she used to lull her baby to sleep. Her heart seemed to stop as tears blurred her vision. Max held her shoulder gently. Stay calm. I'll follow them. Using the surveillance camera that Hélène had secretly provided to Max, they recorded every move Xander made, from handing over prescriptions to signing paperwork for the doctor, to the callous way he separated Celeste from her mother. These recordings were key evidence to formally charge Xander in court. Soon after, Max had a trusted aide discreetly drive the black van behind Xander's SUV without raising suspicion. The route from the hospital led to the island of Saint-Sauveur, where Xander had rented an isolated villa surrounded by iron fences and an automatic gate. As Max and Seraphina crossed the wooden bridge spanning a small canal, Xander noticed the unfamiliar van bearing the Armand Hotel insignia hidden in the darkness. He immediately pulled out his phone to call his men, but Max managed to jam the radio signal, leaving Xander confused. On that remote island, Xander's villa sat nestled among pine trees, its iron gate firmly locked. He had once believed that by hiding the child in such a secluded place, no one could find her, giving him psychological leverage to force Seraphina into submission. However, the legal pressure exerted by Max and Hélène was unsettling him. That night, under the gentle roar of waves lapping against the bridge, Max and Seraphina crouched behind dense foliage. The narrow beams of their flashlights flickered through the leaves, revealing Xander stepping into the garden with Celeste in his arms. The yellow light illuminated his face, a tumult of conflicted emotions hinting at both love and hatred. Seraphina swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She whispered, "I cannot let him keep her like this. I must save my daughter." Max nodded, his voice steady, "I'll stop him. Give Hélène the emergency hotline number. When I signal, she summons the police to move in." Soft, stealthy steps carried Max closer to the iron gate. Xander set Celeste down in the garden, and the little girl, bewildered, gazed toward her mother, her clear eyes lighting up at the sight of Seraphina's familiar shape accompanied by a stranger. Xander held his child's hand tightly, attempting to pull her toward the gate. "You must come with me, sweetheart. I'm taking you somewhere better." Celeste turned and waved at her mother, her bright smile bringing tears to Seraphina's eyes. Seraphina stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Celeste, Mommy's here." Xander immediately recoiled, his voice trembling. "Seraphina, I have the right." Before he could finish, Max lunged forward and wrapped his arms around Xander's back, preventing him from advancing. Xander's head snapped up, eyes wild. "Max, you have no right to interfere in my affairs." Max replied calmly, voice firm, "Tonight, you will not kidnap this child again." He turned to Seraphina, "Take her. Now." Then he dialed his phone on speaker. "Hélène, we need 2 police cars at Saint-Sauveur Bridge immediately. They're holding a child unlawfully." In an instant, the revving of engines and the flashing blue lights approached, casting an urgent glow across the darkness and intimidating the would-be kidnapper. Xander trembled, still gripping Celeste, who shrank closer to her mother in fear. Seraphina wept as she hugged Celeste to her, her breath ragged, and glared at her ex-husband. "You do not deserve to be a father. You've taken the most sacred thing from her, and tonight you will pay." When the 2 police cars arrived, Max handed over all the documentation proving that Celeste was he and Seraphina's biological daughter, not Xander's. Officers skimmed the DNA report, their expressions shifting from surprise to admiration. A tall policeman announced, "Mr. Harlow, you have no legal right to this child. Under a provisional order, we demand you release her immediately and comply with the court's ruling." Xander gaped, his eyes maddened as he looked at Max. You can't." The police promptly arrested Xander and escorted him back to the station to be questioned, awaiting the official court decision. Meanwhile, Seraphina held Celeste tightly, tears streaming as she saw her daughter's innocent face return to normal. She took a deep breath, feeling Celeste's gentle breath against her chest, and slowly turned to Max. Their eyes met, and in that moment, all the pain, anger, joy, and desire to protect one another wove an invisible thread called love. By nightfall, Xander was formally charged with child abduction and deception of the law to assert custody. The court was set to convene an emergency hearing the following week. Seraphina knew her journey to restore a peaceful life for Celeste was far from over, but at least for now, her daughter was safe in her arms. She and Max sat at the edge of the bridge, the gentle sound of waves lulling their ears. Max held Seraphina's small hand and said softly, "You've suffered far too much. I'm sorry I let you face it alone." Seraphina bowed her head, her voice choking. "I couldn't have protected her without you. If it weren't for you. Her words faltered as moonlight danced on the water before them. Max pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead and said, "You and I will protect her, together." Under the twinkling stars, they pledged unbreakable devotion, knowing that no matter what the future held, their unity would remain the sole refuge for all three of them. The trial of Xander Harlow was scheduled for a gloomy morning, with gray clouds drifting slowly across the sky of night, lending an oppressive tension to the day's atmosphere. Seraphina and Celeste arrived early in the waiting area of the International Courthouse, where lawyers, private detectives, and Max Armand stood near the entrance. Before entering, Seraphina led Celeste into a small corner. The little girl played innocently with her lavender teddy bear, her clear eyes sparkling with curiosity as she wondered what was happening. Seraphina bent down, gently stroking her daughter's soft hair, and whispered, "My darling, I know you're still young, but today I need you by my side. Mommy will always protect you, do you understand?" Celeste took her mother's finger and, nodding solemnly, replied, "I understand, Mommy." Seraphina's emotion welled up, and she smiled tenderly as she kissed Celeste's forehead, then straightened her shoulders and returned a brave smile when Max came up beside her and lightly squeezed her shoulder. "You've been so strong," he said encouragingly. Inside the courtroom, Xander sat in the defendant's chair, looking sullen. His eyes flickered toward Seraphina now and then, but he quickly averted his gaze. He wore a dark gray suit, but his face was pale, his eyes betrayed a turmoil of regret, or perhaps a calculated show of regret. In advance of the trial, Max's detectives had gathered ample evidence, an extortionate email from Elara Marcellus outlining how to accuse Seraphina of staging an incident in order to collect her life insurance payout, forged documents claiming Xander's custody rights that he had signed in collusion with Elara, and a DNA report from the medical center confirming that Celeste was not Xander's biological child, together with the physician's testimony attesting to Celeste's birth date and her birth certificate filed under the alias Sophie Moreau. All of this was presented before the court. Alongside those documents, Max played a recording on a large screen, Xander's phone call with Elara on the night Seraphina miscarried, during which Xander admitted he suspected his wife of faking a faint to collect insurance money, and Elara attempted to cover up the truth. As Seraphina heard the recording, her chest tightened, but she remained composed and lifted her chin, telling herself, "Finally, the truth is revealed." Xander's defense attorney tried to argue that the recordings and documents were illegally obtained because Max had privately hired detectives, but the judge shook her head. This evidence demonstrates clear emotional and legal motives. It is valid for determining the severity of the violations. In the hallway, Elara Marcellus appeared as well. Once a proud assistant, she now looked haggard. She had been summoned to testify and was forced to face charges of conspiring against a pregnant woman, deliberately administering a sedative to cause a medical emergency. When called before the bench, Elara's head lowered, and her face went blank as the doctor testified in precise detail about the sedative and her actions, compelling her to sign a guarantee. Xander's spirit seemed to collapse. He began to sob uncontrollably, pleading, "I know I was wrong. It was Elara who pressured me into doing it. She's the real deceiver. Your Honor, please show mercy." But his tearful entreaties could not erase the crimes he had committed, whether physical assault, psychological harm, or the abduction of a child. The panel of judges remained silent, save for the judge's gavel confirming that the trial would proceed. When Seraphina's own attorney rose to speak, she emphasized, child abduction, forged documents, assault, and psychological abuse. These actions have no place under international law. Celeste Aurora, the true daughter of Ms. Everly, was deprived of her right to safety and to live with her rightful mother. Mr. Harlow's conduct constitutes a serious violation of the human rights of both Ms. Everly and young Celeste. We ask this court to impose a severe sentence, both as punishment and to protect the child's rightful interests. A smattering of applause rose from the audience as Seraphina wiped away tears and looked gratefully toward Max, who offered her a reassuring smile. By late afternoon, the closing arguments and sentencing were broadcast live through screens in the hallway, where Seraphina waited anxiously beside Max. The judge pronounced, based on irrefutable evidence, this court sentences Mr. Xander Harlow to 7 years imprisonment for the following charges: child abduction, forging official documents, conspiring to harm his ex-wife that resulted in her miscarriage, and causing psychological and physical harm to Ms. Everly. Additionally, Ms. Alara Marcellus is sentenced to 5 years imprisonment for aiding in the conspiracy against a pregnant woman, document fraud, and related criminal acts. Xander's face contorted as he glared at Seraphina with hatred, though he retained no power now. Alara trembled and muttered softly, "Please forgive me. I was wrong." But her words could not sway the court. At the final blow of the gavel, Seraphina felt the weight of 2 years of pain dissolve in fragments. Tears poured from her eyes, half from grief and half from the exaltation of reclaiming her freedom and her right to be Celeste's mother. Down the hallway, Celeste was brought to her, the little girl, startled but then recognizing her mother, threw her arms around Seraphina and called out, "Maman." Her innocent voice cut through all sorrow like an arrow piercing armor, and Seraphina gasped, overwhelmed by love. She held her daughter tightly, as though never to let go, murmuring, "Mommy is here, my sweet girl." Max stepped forward, opening his arms to embrace both of them. He knelt to press a kiss to Celeste's forehead, smiling warmly. Seraphina looked up at Max, her eyes brimming with gratitude and love as she whispered through tears, "Without you, I couldn't have done this." Max clasped her hand firmly and replied softly, "And without you, I couldn't either." After the trial, Seraphina, Max, and Celeste began reclaiming a peaceful life. They moved into a small villa on the Amalfi coast, where the gentle sound of waves and the golden sunlight embraced them. Their new home was filled with sunlight, the walls were painted a soft cream, and glass doors opened onto a garden brimming with hydrangeas and lavender. Celeste, now almost 4 years old, loved to run across the green lawn, blurting out simple English phrases and occasionally singing the songs her mother taught her. Seraphina opened a small English tutoring center and launched a project to support women who had suffered abuse, her way of giving back for the second chance life had offered her. Each day, she sat at an antique oak desk surrounded by young children and their mothers, diligently writing out the alphabet and teaching them basic vocabulary. Meanwhile, Max managed the family's hotel but always made a point to pick up Seraphina and Celeste each afternoon so they could stroll along the beach together and watch the sky turn rosy at sunset. One afternoon, as Seraphina and Max took Celeste by bicycle to her preschool, the little girl fell on the pavement. Her knees and elbows were scraped raw, yet she still grinned and declared, "I'm okay, Mommy." Seraphina gently cleaned the scrapes and asked the teacher for a day off, then carried Celeste down to the shore. She wrapped her daughter in her arms as they both laughed, as if to cloak themselves in an unending sense of security. At night, once Celeste was tucked into bed and fast asleep, Seraphina joined Max on the balcony, gazing at the city lights scattered below. The sea breeze carried the faint scent of salt and the chirping of birds nesting beneath the eaves, heralding a new day's promise. Max ran his fingers through her hair and murmured, "You have become an extraordinary mother. I am so proud of you." Seraphina turned to him, her eyes shimmering, "We weathered the storm together. You are the reason Celeste and I have this life." Max smiled gently, looked up at the starlit sky, and then lowered his lips to hers in a warm kiss. All the months of struggle, the losses and tears, were now repaid by simple happiness, their small family together at last. In her open heart, Seraphina silently thanked fate for bringing Max into their lives, someone who loved and protected both her and her precious daughter from the very beginning. She knew the future would not always be smooth, but now, at least, she had found a haven where the sunsets were eternally rosy and true love reigned. 1 year after Xander's sentence, Seraphina and Max's little family welcomed another joy, the birth of their son, Orion Lucian, on a brilliantly sunny morning along the Amalfi coast. As the hospital director held the chubby baby swaddled in a pale yellow blanket, Seraphina clutched him to her chest, greeting his first cries as a symphony of hope. Her eyes sparkled with happiness mingled with the bittersweet memory of hardships overcome. Standing beside her, Max's face lit up with tears as he whispered into her ear, "Thank you for giving me the greatest gift of my life." In the days that followed, Orion Lucian became the center of everyone's adoration. Celeste Aurora, now 5 years old, with mother's wavy hair, watched her baby brother intently. Occasionally, she would wipe away her mother's sleep-deprived tears and cheerfully say, "Don't be sad, Mama, my little brother will bring us all so much joy." Max and Seraphina devoted all their love to their 2 children, weaving together a home full of laughter. One afternoon, Max took the family out on a boat along the bay. As the sunset dyed the water in shades of pink, Celeste held her mother's hand and shouted excitedly, "Mama, look, over there." Orion nodded contentedly with the rhythm of the waves, his dark eyes shining with wonder. Inside their cozy villa, Seraphina set to work expanding Project Serenity, a center to support women and children who had been victims of domestic abuse, helping them rediscover their confidence and begin anew. Each day, she arrived at her office, which was decorated in soft pastel tones and warmed by oak furnishings, with walls adorned by lavender-themed paintings created by Celeste herself. Nearby, Max finished his work at the family's hotel before joining her to coordinate funding and encourage benefactors to contribute. They organized counseling workshops and parenting skills seminars for single mothers, as well as therapeutic outings on their private beach, where the gentle sea breeze and dawn's soft light soothed wounded spirits. One evening, Max and Seraphina sat down to dinner with their children in the garden under glowing lanterns. The sea breeze drifted through, bringing the faint, sweet scent of lavender. Celeste excitedly recounted how, at preschool that day, she had told her classmates about a brave mother and a kind father, leaving everyone in awe. Orion smiled happily, his baby face flushed with delight. Max gently stroked Celeste's dark hair and said, "You've made your mother so proud." Seraphina lowered her eyes, her gaze tenderly taking in their little family. "We endured the storm together, and now we live in peace." Memories of the nights Seraphina had spent searching frantically for Celeste and the lonely days of pregnancy-induced exhaustion no longer weighed on her. Now, she held her 2 little angels in her arms, heard their laughter each morning, and savored a love that filled every corner of their home. Before darkness fully fell, the couple led Celeste by the hand and carried Orion down to a small stretch of beach where the Mediterranean lay calm as a giant mirror reflecting the starry sky. The wind drifted by, the waves lapping softly. Seraphina tucked Orion into her arms as he yawned and drifted off to sleep. She leaned her head against Max's shoulder and whispered, "I feel like my life is complete." Max gazed into her eyes, where he saw a love deeper than any promise. He inhaled the cool sea breeze and responded softly, "And you are the greatest thing that ever happened to me." 4 silhouettes, 2 children and 2 parents, were etched on the soft sand, creating a serene, perfect portrait of a family at home. In that tranquil moment, Seraphina realized that fate had guided her through the storm to find true love, and that every child's laughter today was a testament to the hope and resilience that had never died. As the first stars began to shine overhead, she nestled closer to Max, and together their hearts quietly celebrated the happiness they had earned. Spring morning returned to the Amalfi coast, golden sunlight filtering through rustling pines while lavender blossoms swayed in the breeze. Seraphina woke just as the sun peeked over the horizon. Her gaze softened as she looked toward the crib, where Orion Lucian slept soundly, his breaths gentle and even. She leaned forward and placed a tender kiss on his forehead, her lips curving into a gentle smile. "Good morning, my little angel," she whispered. The soft click of the door opening was followed by Celeste's excited voice. The little girl dashed into the room, her round eyes widening at the sight of her curled-up baby brother wrapped snugly in his blanket. "Orion is sleeping so peacefully," Celeste exclaimed, rising onto her tiptoes to plant a soft kiss on his cheek. From the doorway, Max entered carrying a tray of bread and fresh fruit. His warm gaze swept over the four of them. "Ready for breakfast, everyone?" In their small kitchen, laughter mingled with the sweetness of honey on toasted bread as the family gathered around the table. After breakfast, Max ushered Celeste and Orion into the garden, where hydrangea bushes bloomed brilliantly. Celeste carefully watered each pot of flowers, proudly showing Max and Seraphina the collection of dried petals she had gathered during the previous weekend's outing. Seraphina sat nearby, watching her daughter's graceful movements with a heart overflowing with love. Around 10 o'clock, Seraphina retreated to her home office, a cozy room lined with bookshelves and walls decorated with photos of families helped by Project Serenity. She spent the morning drafting lesson plans and preparing for an end-of-month workshop, where she would share her own story with other women. She wanted them to know that, despite enduring pain and profound loneliness, they too could rise again and find their own path to happiness. Each word she wrote was drawn from personal experience, and she trusted that her honest reflections would touch the hearts of those still suffering. Meanwhile, Max used the morning to finalize plans for upgrading their hotel in Positano, organizing his business schedule, and preparing for an upcoming trip to Venice to meet new partners. He often joined Seraphina at her wooden desk to discuss ideas. "What do you think about setting up a scholarship fund for underprivileged children in the area?" he asked. Seraphina nodded enthusiastically, her eyes shining. "That's a wonderful idea. Our children already have a new life. I want to share some of that hope with kids who aren't so fortunate." They shared a satisfied smile as their hands met on the desk, their warm heartbeat echoing in that moment. In the afternoon, when slanted sunlight streamed through the large window, Seraphina loaded Orion into his stroller and set out for a stroll, while Celeste practiced counting in both English and French as she walked, prompting smiles from passers-by. They stopped at their favorite seaside cafe, where the owner greeted them warmly and congratulated Seraphina on seeing her with both children. Outside, the waves broke softly, carrying the salty air and warm sand to the feet of everyone strolling past. That evening, after dinner, the four of them gathered in the living room, placing a rug on the floor. They laid Orion between his mother and father, while Celeste sat cross-legged, grinning with excitement as her mother told a bedtime fairy tale. Seraphina's sweet voice carried both children into an enchanted world, where brave warrior women and gentle princes built a peaceful kingdom together. Orion giggled at his mother's lullaby-like narration, and Celeste eagerly posed a question, "Mommy, can I be a brave warrior like in the story?" Seraphina drew her daughter close in a tender embrace. "Of course you can, because you are Celeste Aurora, the dawn of my life." In that tranquil moment, Max reached for Seraphina's hand and looked into her eyes, bright with hope. "Together, we have written the most beautiful chapters of our lives," he said softly. Seraphina smiled, gently kissed his cheek, and whispered, "Bonne nuit," as peacefulness enveloped them all. Before turning out the lights, she glanced through the window, where the slender crescent moon floated in the night sky. Its silvery light streamed inside, sketching delicate slivers of radiance across the wooden floor. She thought, life may stretch on endlessly, but true happiness often lives in these small moments, when family gathers, when a child clings to her mother, and when genuine love connects two hearts. Under that gentle moonlight, Seraphina silently vowed to protect the peace of their little home, so that each passing day would not just be mere existence, but a journey marked by hope, love, and enduring happiness. 5 years slipped by, and the Amalfi coast shone with summer brilliance, echoing with the delighted laughter of Celeste and Orion. Celeste was now 6 years old, her black hair curling in waves just like her mother's, her bright eyes filled with an insatiable curiosity about the vast world. She spoke fluent French, English, and Vietnamese, effortlessly switching among languages as though building bridges between all parts of their family. Orion, nearly 3, darted here and there with boundless energy, chasing butterflies and collecting seashells along the shoreline. This morning, gentle sunlight streamed through the curtains as Seraphina rose early to prepare breakfast. She woke Orion with a soft touch and carried him into the backyard to pick a few sprigs of lavender for the kitchen, filling the air with a fresh, fragrant perfume. Celeste, now wearing a pastel-colored floral dress, ran in to embrace her mother and announce, "Mommy, today I have to give a presentation in class about you and your project." Seraphina smiled with pride, smoothing her daughter's hair. "You'll do great. Tell your classmates how Mommy overcame hardships and found hope." As the family gathered around a breakfast table laden with fresh fruit, toast, and honey, Max added 2 glasses of milk and a plate of cut fruit for the children. He glanced at his wife with love shining in his eyes. "After Celeste's presentation, we'll pack a picnic and head to the olive grove behind the hotel. Then, over the weekend, we'll organize a small charity event for the local children." Seraphina nodded, her heart fluttering with joy. "Perfect. I'll help Celeste prepare her presentation." After breakfast, Celeste grabbed her notebook and raced upstairs, eager to immerse herself in her childhood world as she shaped her talk about Project Serenity. Her presentation included pictures of women the project had supported and stories of success that had rekindled hope, some women who opened small boutiques, others who learned tailoring, and still others who rediscovered happiness with their families. She spoke of her mother with reverence. "My mother endured great suffering, but she rose above her circumstances and became a guiding light for so many hearts." Thunderous applause erupted from her classmates, and the teacher beamed, "Celeste Aurora, you are brave and talented." When Celeste ran down to hug her mother, her hair streaming behind her, Seraphina could only return her daughter's embrace with a blissful smile and a kiss on her forehead. At midday, the family packed supplies and set off for the Serenity Olive Grove, a spacious plot that Max and Seraphina had dedicated for community therapy gatherings. The gnarly olive trees stretched their branches beneath a clear blue sky, interspersed with rhododendron bushes and clusters of heavy grapevines. Every Sunday, they invited local women and children to join volunteer-led activities here: movement games, counseling workshops, painting sessions, and light picnics beneath the trees. Today, around a long table draped with a white cloth, the children eagerly arranged bowls, utensils, and platters of sweet pastries, fresh fruit, orange juice, cinnamon toast, and homemade honey treats. The participants chatted animatedly, smiles dispelled the shadows of past lives marked by abuse, and mothers who had once felt hopeless now found camaraderie and laughter. With the Scholarship of Hope initiative just launched, many underprivileged children would now receive awards to attend school, learning English, French, arts, and practical skills. Celeste and Orion ran among the olive trees, handing sprigs of lavender to the younger children, warming the picnic with genuine affection. In the heart of the grove, Seraphina offered a brief talk about her journey. "There was a time when I believed I could not go on, when darkness had swallowed all my dreams. But someone's love guided me forward, and I realized that I could use my story to inspire others. Life never has only one path. If we dare to walk on, hope will accompany us." Applause thundered alongside shouts of "Bravo!" mark. Many listeners were moved to tears. Max stood by Seraphina's side, holding her hand, his soul brimming with pride. When the picnic ended, everyone packed up and took a commemorative photo amid the olive trees, a portrait capturing solidarity, compassion, and hope. That evening, back at their villa, the 4 of them stood on the balcony to watch fireworks erupt over the Amalfi Bay in celebration of the summer festival. The sky sparkled as if a cascade of stars had fallen onto the water. Celeste squealed with delight, waving her hands. "Mommy, I wish you and Daddy will stay happy together forever." Orion gazed up at his mother, eyes wide with wonder at his first-ever fireworks display. Max wrapped his arms around both children and then kissed Seraphina's forehead. "I wish, too, a lifetime with you and our two little angels." In that brief yet profoundly emotional moment, Seraphina closed her eyes and felt every small beat of her heart. She knew how dearly they had paid for this happiness, yet now, all the tears, the anger, and the struggles were fading into distant memories. The next morning, the final segment of Project Serenity aired on the local television station, spotlighting Seraphina Everly, this once Vietnamese woman who overcame every storm to become a symbol of strength for the Amalfi region. As the broadcast echoed through town, many viewers followed her journey from ruin to renewal, discovering a newfound belief that happiness awaits all who dare to rise. That late night, Orion slept soundly while Celeste lay beside her mother, her eyes drifting shut. "Mommy, I'm going to sleep with joy," she murmured. Seraphina gently kissed her daughter's forehead. "And I will sleep in happiness," she replied softly. The small room was filled only with the steady breathing of mother and child, the moonlight painting thin ribbons of silver on the walls. Max entered quietly, leaning in to kiss Seraphina's lips. "Thank you for choosing me and this life," he whispered. She responded with a soft kiss, placing on his lips a silent vow, "You and our children are my reason to keep hope alive." Under the warm glow of the lamp, they joined hands and gazed out the window, where the slender crescent moon cast its delicate light, thin yet enough to illuminate the entire night. They understood that many challenges still lay ahead, but now, with love, hope, and family beside them, any storm could be weathered. And in that moment of profound calm, the hearts of two parents and two children, beat together in faith and joy, nourished by tears that had dried and wounds that had healed. Endeavoring onward, they carried a quiet assurance that the journey of hope, love, and happiness would endure in their small, bright world.